To everyone listening today, I want to tell you a story. It is a sad story, one filled with hardship, but I believe it holds a deep lesson about the bonds of family and the resilience of the human spirit. For those of you who may have heard me speak before about my daughter Susan, today I want to share a different part of my life, a time when I had to face a severe trial right inside my own home. The three-story house that I had spent my entire life building, once a place filled with laughter and warmth, became a cold battlefield almost overnight after my son Michael married her. Every day was a silent war, a quiet and relentless confrontation that only she and I were fighting. My son Michael was a good and dutiful child from the moment he was born. After my husband passed away when Michael was still young, he became my greatest comfort. I raised him by myself, pouring all of my love and effort into making sure he would have the best possible life. Michael grew into a strong, healthy young man. He excelled in school, built a successful career, and became a man of good standing in our community. I was always so proud of him, and I trusted that my son would find a smart, loving woman to build a family with. Then one day, Michael brought her home to meet me. Her name was Chloe. From the very first moment I lay eyes on her, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Something was just not right. Chloe was beautiful, with a sharp, intelligent look about her, big, round eyes, and a radiant smile. She was well-spoken, polite, and seemed so considerate on the surface. But somehow, I felt a chill hiding behind those eyes, a calculated coldness that I just couldn't put my finger on. I tried to push that intuition away. I told myself I was just getting old and fussy. My son loved her, and that's what mattered most, right? The wedding was a lovely, warm affair. I held on to the hope that, once they were married, Chloe would gradually settle into our family, and we would all live together in happiness. But I was wrong. The change began within the first few days. Our three-story house, which had once been my sanctuary, quickly turned into a cold and hostile place. The days became a silent battle, a quiet confrontation known only to the two of us. My son, Michael, was consumed by his demanding job. He was often away on business trips or would come home late from the office. He didn't seem to notice what was happening in his own home. Or perhaps he chose not to see it. In the early morning, just as the first rays of sun were streaming through the windows, I would hear the sharp clatter of dishes from the kitchen downstairs. It wasn't the sound of someone rushing to make breakfast. It was the sound of anger, a noise made deliberately to shatter the peace. Plates would crash against each other in the sink, and pots would be slammed onto the stove, as if she were taking out her frustrations on these inanimate objects. I knew it was her way of expressing her displeasure with me. It was a wordless communication, but it carried a destructive force. She never said a single thing to me, but those sounds said it all. I would lie in bed and sigh, trying to shake off the heaviness in my heart, but it was no use. I felt as though I was living in a hollow house where every single sound was a carrier of a negative message meant just for me. Then, in the evenings, just as I might be drifting off for a little nap, the sound of a door slamming would echo through the house, making the entire frame shudder. It was never just the sound of a door being closed. It was a sound of immense frustration and contempt. It was as if she were declaring, "This is my territory. Don't you even think about crossing into it?" The heavy wooden door would smack against the doorframe with a jarring crack. That would jolt me awake. I would just lie there, my eyes closed, but my heart would be racing. My mind was never at peace. I felt like a prisoner in my own room, afraid to venture out, afraid to disturb the territory she had claimed within the walls of my own home. And then, when night fell, the delicious, savory smells of cooking would drift through the house, but only around the door to my son and his wife's bedroom. The scent of steak searing on a grill, of freshly fried fish, of a rich, hearty stew would creep under their door, travel down the hallway and tease my nose, making my stomach ache with a hunger that was almost painful. Here I was, the mother-in-law, the owner of this very house, sitting all alone in a cold kitchen, forced to smell a dinner I was not allowed to eat. It was her way of insulting me, of isolating me. It was a clever method, and a terribly cruel one. I felt like a beggar in my own home, as if I had been stripped of the simple right to have a meal, to enjoy the warmth of a home-cooked dinner with my family. Life in this house gradually settled into a clear and painful division. I would make my own dinner, the simple, humble food an old woman like me was used to. Most days, it was nothing more than some boiled vegetables, a small bowl of thin broth, or maybe a single fried egg. My meals were plain, sometimes lonely, but I told myself that I was old now and didn't need anything fancy. She, on the other hand, cooked separately for herself and Michael. Her meals were expensive and elaborate, filled with choice cuts of meat, fresh fish, shrimp, and even crab on occasion. I knew she did it on purpose, cooking these extravagant dishes and letting the tantalizing aromas drift through the house as if to taunt me. If I opened the main refrigerator in the kitchen, I would find it nearly bare. There was never anything set aside for me. Meanwhile, she had her own mini fridge installed in their bedroom, and it was always packed to the brim with fresh steaks, seafood, and crisp vegetables. It was a deliberate and obvious act of discrimination. I would be in the kitchen eating my boiled broccoli, and from their room, I would hear the sound of loud music blaring while she and Michael ate prime rib. It felt as if she were showing off her wealth and her happiness, rubbing it in my face. Every time I heard that thumping music from their room, a bitter feeling would well up in my chest. I felt like a ghost in my own home, completely unseen, overlooked, and forgotten. I tried to be patient. I tried to endure it all. I told myself that my son had chosen her, and so I had to accept her. I didn't want to get in the way of his happiness. The last thing I ever wanted was for Michael to be caught in the middle, torn between his mother and his wife. I even tried to build a bridge, to make peace. Sometimes I would try to speak with her, asking gently about her day at work or about her life. But she would always give me short, clipped answers, or she would simply avoid my gaze altogether, turning away as if I wasn't even there. It seemed my patience only made her bolder, more self-righteous, more cruel. She took my silence as weakness, as a sign that I accepted her behavior. One week, I realized I had been forced to shower in ice-cold water for 3 straight days. Winter had already begun to set in, and a biting chill had settled over the house. A cold northern wind whistled through a crack in the window frame, and my old bones ached. But the water heater simply wouldn't produce any warm water. At first, I just assumed it was broken, and I tried to bear it. Each time I stepped into the bathroom, my body would tremble uncontrollably as the frigid water hit my skin. I tried to wash as quickly as I could, but I couldn't stop shivering. I went down to the basement to check the water heater myself, but I couldn't find anything wrong with it. I was confused, but I still didn't have the courage to ask her about it. Then, on the 3rd day, as I stood there shivering under the freezing spray, a terrible thought suddenly pierced through the cold. What if she was doing this on purpose? What if she had shut off the hot water supply? My heart seized in my chest. A hot surge of anger rose up inside me, a feeling so strong it almost made me dizzy. Could she really do this to me? Could she be so cruel to her husband's elderly, weakened mother? To the woman who had dedicated her entire life to caring for this family and this home? I remained silent. I didn't say a single word. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to worry my son. But I knew I couldn't let this continue, couldn't just endure it forever. I knew, better than anyone, that a mother-in-law's silence can sometimes be more frightening than any angry words. I would not react immediately. I would wait. I would bide my time for payback. I would let her know. I would make her understand that my silence was not weakness. It was me, preparing for a fight. The next day, I heard the shower running upstairs. The sound of the water drumming against the tiles echoed through the house. After a few minutes, when I knew she was in the middle of it, I slipped quietly down the stairs. I knew this was my chance. I made my way to the electrical panel in the basement. My hand trembled just a little as I reached for the circuit breaker. I took a deep breath and flipped the switch. Click. The breaker for the water heater was off. A moment later, a shriek came from the bathroom. It was a sound filled with shock, anger, and a touch of panic. What are you doing, Evelyn? It's freezing. I'm going to get hypothermia. I allowed myself a small smile. It was a bitter smile, I admit, but it was also filled with a dark sort of satisfaction. I called back in a perfectly calm voice, as if I had no idea what she was talking about. Oh dear, is the water heater broken again? This old woman doesn't know how to work these newfangled things. I made sure to emphasize the words, old woman, and don't know how. It was a gentle jab, but it was loaded with meaning, a quiet but profound piece of sarcasm. I could hear her teeth grinding, her breath coming in short, furious gasps. I knew she was standing in that shower, shivering from the cold and shaking with rage. I also knew she didn't believe a word I said, but that didn't matter. She didn't need to believe me. I just wanted her to feel a fraction of the helplessness and discomfort I had been forced to endure. It was a small victory, a sweet little piece of revenge. It brought me a small measure of relief, but that relief was mixed with a deep sadness. Life in this house had turned us into enemies, constantly trying to hurt one another. On another occasion, she was getting all dressed up to go to some fancy event. She spent hours in front of the mirror, meticulously applying her makeup, drawing each line on her face with painstaking care. She picked out her most expensive dress, the one that probably cost more than my entire monthly pension. I sat in the living room, watching her from a distance. She looked beautiful, sophisticated even, but to me, she just looked cold and heartless. I waited until she walked out the front door. I listened for the sound of her car starting, the engine growling to life before pulling out of the driveway. I waited until the sound faded completely into the distance. I took a deep breath, walked over to the front door, and slid the deadbolt into place. The solid thunk echoed in the silent house. I went back to the living room and poured myself a cup of hot tea. I sat in my armchair, sipping it slowly, listening to the wind whistling outside. I knew she would eventually return. I pictured her face when she realized she was locked out, the shock, the disbelief, and then the pure, unadulterated rage. A feeling of satisfaction, one I couldn't quite put into words, washed over me. But it was quickly followed by a pang of deep sadness. I never wanted to be a cruel mother-in-law. I never wanted to be this person. But she had pushed me, cornered me until I had no other choice. About an hour later, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I heard the car door slam shut, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. The sharp click-clack of her high heels on the concrete walkway grew louder and louder. Then came the pounding on the door. "Evelyn, are you crazy? I have to be somewhere. Open this door right now." Her voice was laced with fury and a rising tide of panic. The pounding grew more frantic, more violent, as if she was trying to break the door down with her bare hands. I took another slow sip of my tea before I answered. "Oh my," I said, my voice deliberately slow and a little shaky. "You know how forgetful an old woman can be. I thought you had already left for the day." I drew the words out, making her wait, letting her stew in her own powerlessness. Through the thick oak door, I could hear her grinding her teeth again, her breath catching in ragged, angry sobs. I knew she was standing out there on the porch, trembling with a mixture of helplessness and pure fury. And again, I felt that indescribable sense of satisfaction. It was my way of standing up for myself, of taking back a small piece of my own home. It was a subtle way to fight back, but it was powerful. The Cold War between us continued, growing more intense with each passing day. I knew, without a doubt, that she was trying to force me out of the house I had built. And I, as an old woman who was growing weaker by the day, had to find ways to defend myself, to protect the little dignity and peace I had left. Then one day, the absolute worst thing happened. It was a damp, drizzly afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy and everything is slick with moisture. I was making my way down the stairs, one hand gripping the old, polished oak banister for support. My legs weren't as steady as they used to be, so I was taking my time, carefully placing one foot after the other on each step. Suddenly, I felt a push from behind. It wasn't a hard push, but it was firm, deliberate. It was the pressure of a hand, a cold and malicious hand, right in the small of my back. I lost my footing instantly. My balance gave way, and I tumbled forward, down the long, cold flight of stairs. The world went sideways, a blur of wood and wall, before everything ended with a sickening thud. The fall wasn't a terrible one, but it was enough to leave me stunned. I lay there on the cold landing, staring up at the ceiling as tears traced paths down my cheeks. Her? Had she really done that to me? Had she tried to kill me? I hadn't seen her face, but I had felt her presence looming over me, a cold and wicked thing. I heard her frantic footsteps as she scrambled back up the stairs, disappearing from view. People from all over the house, even some neighbors, came running. They rushed to help me up, their faces etched with concern. They all thought I had simply missed a step, that it was a terrible accident. "Are you okay? Does anything hurt?" they asked, their voices full of worry. But I was the only one who knew. I was the only one who had felt the hand that gave me that gentle, firm push. It was a cold hand, a hand filled with malice. I didn't tell them the truth. I didn't want to cause a scene, and more than anything, I didn't want to worry my son. I just wanted him to be able to do his work in peace. I was taken to the hospital. My son, Michael, was away on a business trip at the time. I didn't want to bother him, and I certainly didn't want to cause him any alarm. I just wanted him to be able to focus on his work. I called him and told him I'd had a little tumble, that it was nothing serious. I tried to keep my voice steady and calm, making sure he wouldn't detect the tremor of fear and pain that was running through me. During my stay in the hospital, I endured the pain and loneliness by myself. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, didn't even bother to call a taxi to take me there. She never once came to visit me. "What's worse," she told my grandson, "the child I doted on the most? Not to give his grandma any treats. Grandma is sick," I heard her telling him over the phone, her voice dripping with fake concern, "so she can't have anything that might upset her stomach." I knew exactly what she was doing. She was deliberately trying to isolate me, to make me feel completely and utterly abandoned. I lay there, staring at the sterile white ceiling tiles, and I cried. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. I felt so alone, so terribly weak. I asked myself why my life had come to this. Had I done something wrong? I had sacrificed everything for my family, for my children, and now I was being treated with such cruelty. But it was right there, in that moment of despair, that a powerful resolve began to form in my heart. I would not give in. I would not let her win. I had to get back up. I had to fight. When I returned home, I secretly installed a tiny camera on a shelf in the living room. It was a small device, hidden behind a stack of old books, almost impossible to spot unless you knew exactly where to look. I understood now. The Cold War had become a real war. I needed proof. I had to protect myself, and I had to protect this house, the home I had spent my entire life building. I could not simply endure her cruelty forever without fighting back. That tiny USB drive held everything. It recorded the moment Chloe secretly threw away the food I had painstakingly prepared for myself. I would get up in the early morning, carefully select fresh vegetables from the market, and cook a simple, healthy meal appropriate for an old woman. I had hoped she would at least respect my effort. But she didn't. She scraped all of it into the trash can, as if it were nothing but garbage. Watching that video, my heart constricted. A wave of pain, anger, and profound disappointment washed over me. It also recorded her talking on the phone with a friend. Her voice was laced with contempt. "That old bat is tough as nails," she spat into the phone. "It would have been so much easier if she'd just died when she fell down the stairs. But she's still kicking." When I heard those words, my entire body started to tremble. Tough as nails. The phrase was like a knife plunging straight into my heart. I couldn't believe that the woman my son had chosen for a wife could be such a cruel, wicked person. She didn't just want me out of the house, she actually wanted me dead. It recorded the moment she pushed me while I was carrying a heavy pitcher of water, a clear attempt to make me fall. It was a deliberate act, filled with a quiet, venomous malice. I remember the feel of her hand on my back, a firm and sudden shove. I stumbled forward, the water sloshing over the sides of the pitcher, my old ankles twisting as I fought to regain my balance. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought I was going to go down, crashing onto the hard tile floor. But I managed to steady myself, my heart hammering against my ribs. And she just stood there, a few feet away, watching me with those cold, flat eyes. There wasn't a flicker of remorse, not a hint of concern. Just a silent, chilling observation. As I replayed that clip over and over, the truth settled in my bones like a winter frost. My fall down the stairs had never been an accident. It was a plan. It was her doing. Every time I watched those videos, my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. A wave of pain, a surge of anger, and a deep, bottomless disappointment churned inside me. I simply could not believe that the woman my son had chosen to be his wife, the woman living under my roof, could be such a cruel and evil human being. I kept that USB drive hidden away, like a secret weapon. I didn't say a word to my son. I just waited. I waited for the right time, the right moment to reveal the truth. I knew I couldn't go on like this, simply enduring her abuse in silence. I had to do something to protect myself, and to protect the sanctity of this home. The night Michael returned from a long business trip, I silently placed a copy of the USB drive on his desk. I didn't say a word. I just set it down right next to his laptop, knowing he would see it almost immediately. I went to sit in the living room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my chest. I knew it was going to be a long night. I heard Michael's footsteps as he went into his study. I heard the soft whir of his laptop starting up. And then, a dreadful silence fell over the entire house. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I held my breath, listening, waiting. It only took a few minutes. From my son's study, the sharp, violent sound of shattering glass ripped through the quiet. Crash! It was the sound of a drinking glass hitting the floor. And then, Michael's roar of fury echoed through the house, a sound I had never heard from him before. "What the hell did you do to my mother? For years?" His voice was thick with rage, but underneath it, I could hear the crackle of disbelief and a deep, agonizing pain. I heard her start to cry, her voice rising in a panicked wail of denial. "What are you talking about? I didn't do anything. Your mother is making things up again." She sounded like a victim, like she was being unfairly accused, but I knew it was all an act. The evidence, however, was right there on his laptop screen. Images and sounds of the truth, undeniable and raw. I knew my son had seen everything. He had finally seen his wife for who she truly was. There was no more hiding. After that night, the atmosphere in the house became suffocatingly tense. Michael didn't speak a single word to me about it, but I could see the torment in his eyes. He had been deceived by the woman he loved, and he was just now realizing what his own mother had been forced to endure all. This time, right under his nose. And she, Chloe, she changed. It was a sudden transformation, so abrupt it was terrifying. She began to put on a show of false courtesy. She would cook me elaborate, beautiful-looking meals. She would bring me my medicine with a gentle, caring tone in her voice. She even started asking about my health, about what I might want or need. She was trying so hard to play the part of the dutiful, loving daughter-in-law, the perfect wife. But I knew it was all a performance, a carefully constructed play designed to cover up the ugly truth. I knew her anger hadn't vanished. Deep in her eyes, behind the fake smile, I could still see the hatred and resentment simmering, waiting. I remained on my guard. I kept my distance. I didn't trust her for a second. I knew she was just biding her time, waiting for an opportunity to get her revenge. I continued to watch her. I watched every gesture, listened to every word. I never let on that I suspected a thing, but I was always ready. I knew this battle wasn't over. And then, that day came. She was carrying a bowl of hot soup, a manufactured smile plastered on her face. "Here you go, Mother," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Eat it while it's hot." It was so saccharine it made my skin crawl. I looked at the bowl of soup, then I looked at her false, smiling face. Something was wrong. A chilling premonition snaked its way through my mind. Suddenly, she threw the bowl of soup right at my face. The hot liquid splashed everywhere, scalding my skin. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the searing heat and the sharp, piercing pain. "You think you're better than me? Is this all just an act?" she screamed. Her face, a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. All the pretense, all the forced, awkward smiles had finally melted away. What was left was a face twisted with a hatred so deep it bordered on madness. She couldn't hold it in any longer. Every ounce of anger, every bit of resentment she had been hiding for so long, finally exploded to the surface in a volcanic eruption of fury. I wiped my face, feeling the sharp, burning sting where the hot soup had scalded my skin. I didn't say a single word. I simply turned, walked calmly over to the china cabinet, and opened the small wooden door. I reached inside and took out a spare USB drive. It was the one I hadn't sent yet. The second copy of all the evidence I had so carefully collected over the past few months. I looked directly at her, my gaze as cold and hard as polished steel. "Do you want me to send this one to your parents?" The color drained from her face. Her eyes went wide, not with anger anymore, but with sheer, paralyzing terror. She stood there, stunned into silence, completely speechless. All the rage, all the frantic madness, vanished in an instant. All that remained was a raw, primal fear. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She knew, in that single, horrifying moment, that I had the power to ruin her reputation, to destroy her entire life, with nothing more than a simple email. And then, she fell to her knees. I stared down at her, crumpled on the floor without a shred of pity. I knew this was it. This was the final, decisive moment of our long and bitter war. I had won. But the victory tasted more bitter than words can possibly say. I didn't feel a single drop of joy, not a flicker of triumph. All I felt was a bone-deep exhaustion and a profound, aching sadness for the family she had shattered. After that day, my son Michael and I went to see an attorney. We had new legal documents drawn up, a revocable living trust. Every single one of my assets, including this 3-story house that I had poured my life into, was placed into that trust, with my grandson, Leo, named as the sole beneficiary. Leo is just an innocent child, completely unaware of the darkness that had unfolded under this roof. Michael and his wife were only granted permission to continue living in the house. The terms were simple. If they didn't agree to them, they were free to leave at any time. I made this difficult decision to protect Leo, to ensure that he would have a safe and secure future, one that would never be tainted by this ugly fight over money and control. When Chloe heard about the new arrangement, she froze. Her face was ashen. "Are you trying to kick me out of this house?" she finally shrieked, her voice a ragged, desperate mix of fury and rising panic. I answered her in a calm, even tone, but my words were like steel. "I'm not kicking you out," I said. "I just don't want to live with someone who tried to kill me." My words hung in the air like a final judgment. There was nothing left for her to say. She had lost. She had lost everything. My son, Michael, finally saw his wife for who she truly was. The evidence on that little drive had opened his eyes to the truth he had refused to see for so long. He made the decision to file for divorce. It was an agonizing choice for him, a painful end to the life he thought he was building. But I knew it was the right one for him and for our whole family. A few weeks later, my daughter-in-law left with a single, small suitcase. She didn't say a word, not even goodbye. I watched her walk down the driveway and get into a taxi without a single pang of regret. Her future would be the price she had to pay for her actions. After she was gone, I cleaned up the living room. I polished the furniture, swept the floors, and then I walked over and threw the windows wide open. The crisp morning sunlight streamed in, chasing away the shadows and the cold, stale air that had lingered for so long. For the first time in years, I could feel the gentle morning breeze on my face without the suffocating stench of hatred hanging in the air. The house finally returned to the quiet peace it was always meant to have. There was no more angry clattering of dishes from the kitchen, no more doors slamming shut in a fit of rage. All that was left was the sweet sound of birds chirping in the garden and the clear, happy laughter of my grandson Leo echoing through the halls. I felt an immense, overwhelming sense of relief, as if a great, heavy weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. My grandson Leo, in his sweet innocence, asked me one day, "Grandma, was Mommy a bad person?" I looked at him, my heart filled with a fierce, protective love. The last thing I ever wanted was to plant a seed of hatred in his young, untroubled mind. "Your mother was wrong," I answered him gently, pulling him close for a hug. But her biggest mistake was not knowing that her grandma was still alive and kicking. I wanted him to understand that no matter what happened, no matter what mistakes were made, his grandmother was strong. And most of all, I wanted him to know, deep in his heart, that his grandma would always, always be here to protect him. I put the USB drive away in a small wooden box, and I placed a label on it that reads, "Never underestimate a mother-in-law's silence." It's a lesson and a warning that I learned through tremendous pain and loss. I keep it safely stored away as a memento, a testament to my own unwavering resilience. And so, to everyone listening, that is where my story ends for today. This has been a journey filled with tears and heartache, but it has also been one filled with hope and, eventually, forgiveness. I lost so many things along the way, but in the end, I was able to reclaim what was most precious, my own peace of mind, and a profound lesson about life itself. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to this old mother's story all the way to the end. Your kind words of encouragement and your deep sympathy have been a tremendous source of strength for me as I navigated these difficult times. I sincerely hope that my story can serve as a reminder, and perhaps a warning, for all of us about the true value of family bonds, the sacrifices that parents make, and the dangerous pitfalls in life that we must always be wary of. I truly believe there is still so much for us to learn in this life, and that every single story holds its own valuable lesson. In my next video, I hope to share another story, another experience, and perhaps another new lesson with all of you. Once again, I want to thank you all so very, very much.